I interviewed a bunch of indie game developers at PAX West, and here is what they said their biggest challenges were. Also, if you're interested, please wishlist my roguelike deck builder Castlemancer over on Steam. Thanks.
What would you say has been like the hardest challenge in terms of like the game development side of this game?
That's a good question. I would say initially it was the technical challenges of the engine. Now it's actually dealing with feedback and trying to incorporate what people like and don't like about the game without sacrificing the vision of the game. We do like feedback. We want to add quality of life improvements, but we also have to do it through the lens of what we're trying to do with the game. So juggling that and still pushing forward has been a bit of a challenge.
Speaking from kind of the like a quest designing perspective, what were some of the challenges either designing quests for this game or developing some of that lore in between the quests?
Yeah, so the setting is pretty interesting by itself. Like Warsaw 1905 is a city that basically no longer exists since Warsaw was completely destroyed during the Second World War. And we had to recreate the city basically, and you actually are able to visit some of the historical sites in Warsaw in our game. A lot of attention to details as well. 1905 Warsaw is a pretty interesting setting, but it had to be done right. So we did a lot of research there to make it cool.
Can you speak a little bit about like kind of the struggles of being like doing so much of the development, the art by yourself?
Yeah, so it's mostly a time sink. So you have to really prioritize what you're doing. You'll get burnt out on certain things, so you need to know what to jump to so you don't get burnt out on the next. And it's really just building that as you go until you get to release. So,
could you speak just briefly about like one of the challenges with kind of this style of game?
So one of the big challenges that we have with this game is that we have a lot of diegetic gameplay. So there's a lot of literal movements that happens when you're doing these things. So when we're looking at the car, which is one of the things that I was responsible for, you really want to kind of have that opportunity of, I want to touch that button, I want to pull that lever, I want to hit the lights, hit the wipers, do all of that sort of stuff. So like we want to be able to really have those kinds of like visual call outs for folks of like, this is where I want to be interacting from inside the car. And then simultaneously we have kind of this visual style of almost like backyard inventor, where you are in a space that is been abandoned and a lot of stuff isn't going to be working the way that it's supposed to. So you have to just kind of try and find pieces that you can to like cobble together stuff. So you're not going to find things that are like, oh, I went down to the electronics store and just
found this,
bought a $20 adapter. And so that really has kind of like helped inform us from an artistic side. As
a smaller studio, what do you think has been like kind of the hardest part about either the design, the art, the marketing potentially?
I want to say it's definitely just the amount of work that's necessary for this kind of stuff. I mean, I think a lot of folks don't realize just how much work goes into games and how much, I mean, especially for us, like how much passion and blood, sweat, and tears that we're putting into this. I mean, it's especially considering most of us are doing this as like a secondary. This is kind of alternative to our day job. So we work our day jobs, then we come back, and this is what we do. So it's we're just going all in. We're trying to just make something really fun, and it's just trying to make sure we can deliver everything perfectly. So
What do you think has been like kind of the most challenging part of developing a game like this?
Developing the game.
Just in general. In
the open world part is
I'm
kind
sure
of
it's
difficult. I forgot to mention this is also 4-player co-op, up to 4-player co-op.
So multiplayer can get pretty tough, right?
Yeah, for sure. But that's the big ones.
Can you speak a little bit about like maybe some of the challenges that game art introduces that maybe more traditional art doesn't?
I think it's really in the quantity. And you need quality. I mean, there are games that can pull off a minimal art style, but there's so much to draw, especially in an open world, different biomes, items, gear, clothes. That's all got to be drawn. So it's really just the volume of what to draw. That's the challenge.
As the lead developer, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you face with giving so much freedom to the player?
Yeah, so it has been a long journey. It's been in development for almost 6 years, and a lot of that time has been trying to figure out how do we make it more accessible. We started off with kind of basic animation software that let you do frame-by-frame animation, which mechanics means that you draw every frame in every animation.
Yeah.
That's a lot of frames.
Yeah.
So it turns out it takes like 50 hours to make a playable character like that, which it's too much for me. It's probably too much for most players.
Yeah.
So we created some additional tools that let you draw your images once, map them to a rig, kind of a 3D skeleton, and then you can actually move and rotate the character as if it was a 3D model. But it's actually just a 2D sprite. So it lets you get something that's playable very quickly.
And then speaking from the development side, what do you think was like one of the biggest challenges that you had to deal with for a game like this?
Well, so from a technical side, multiplayer just makes everything
it makes it super annoying.
like 5 times more complicated and take longer. But I will say that more difficult than the engineering has been the design. The reason being is that asymmetrical, especially when you're doing game mechanics that no one has ever seen before, you're in for a rough ride. Because
you want to make sure one side isn't way more fun than the other, because then it's like, why does anyone want to play the other side?
Way more fun, and then you know, balancing. You might have just like the perfect idea, like, oh, this would be so much fun as the seeker, and then you try it out and you're like, wow, this totally completely ruins the game for the ghosts. And then you have to rethink, like, do you scrap that idea, or do you try to rework it to make it work with the broader game? So that has been the most difficult aspect of developing this thing.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. So do you think the art side has been the most challenging, or maybe some of the technical stuff has been more challenging?
Actually, it's the animations that's
the animations. That's the
big time thing. But we also had to make major adjustments to both the animation software we're using, but also to the engine to make the animations even like work. Technically.
What do you think has been kind of the biggest challenge making a game like this that blends a lot of things together?
Yeah, I would say it's information is key. It's very hard to deliver information to the player in a way that makes it intuitive and not confusing. So there's a lot of strategy involved, and in strategy you have to plan ahead. You have to understand what every move is going to do and what everything means. And delivering that information in good UI design, good UX design, that's very hard.
You briefly talk about some of the challenges of making a game like this. Now, obviously, like you're talking about Diablo, like Activision Blizzard, huge company, they can spend a lot of resources on it. Can you talk about maybe some of the challenges regarding that?
So a roguelike genre for us is something of a niche genre as well. So attracting the market, especially with roguelike games, isn't really something that we're kind of used to. But we're trying to differentiate. With roguelites, I think a lot of our games will be very replayable. There's a loop in the game as well. So it should be something that is very attractive for the market as well.
And can you speak a little bit about some of the challenges that come with developing a game like this? We got a little bit of the footage. It looks incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
Just some of the challenges of working kind of in a small team making a game like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly about having so many different things that everybody has to do. It's like part of why it's fun and why it's challenging as well. Just like gaming, basically. As long as you have some kind of challenge, it's fun to go through.
Can you speak a little bit about some of the challenges being like a true solo indie dev presents when making a game like this?
Yeah, I think for me in the past when I've tried to start projects, the biggest challenge was always like finishing them. So I kind of early on like structured this project so it was just like something I did for fun, and everything about it was like sort of designed that way. So I really enjoy just working alone. Like one of the more stressful parts is probably like coordinating with people and relying on someone else to like get something done. So I just knew this would be a solo project from the beginning, and I thought it would be much smaller. Like I started working on it about 6 years ago. And in a similar way, I made all the tools for the game, so the engine and the level editor, and that was just because I enjoy doing those things, and I really get a lot of satisfaction out of understanding how things work and kind of just doing things my own way. So.
The realization that just because you can do any part of it does not mean you
should
can
do every part
of it. Not if you want to ever release the thing, right? And that's been a lot of things you have to learn the hard way that way. It's also like, even for the stuff that is in my wheelhouse and that I'm most comfortable with, it does take a village, and not having that, or at least only having it in the form of like friends that I have who, like the people helping me out with the booth, which I super appreciate, by the way, who are not working on the game, who, you know, that's where I've been going to like bounce ideas off and like do we like A or B and that sort of thing. But you know, they've all got their own stuff going on. They've got their own jobs that aren't this. So there's only so much that I can do that.
Yeah.
Other than that, honestly, the worst part's been like just making a company, an LLC, and
going through all the
trying to
businessy stuff.
Hire the bit of work that I have contracted out, which is the exteriors of the ships.
All the paperwork.
Yeah, the paperwork and like interviewing and looking for people, like that stuff is...
All the in-between stuff is kind of...
Like, technical challenges are interesting to me, and the creative work gives me life, but that stuff is just a
mind-numbing.
Yeah,
I get that. Are there certain challenges that you've run into as a part of being the creative director when making a game like this?
Well, it's always hard to put everything out, you know?
That makes sense,
and put it in the sentence for people to understand.
Yeah.
But my team has been great to understand what I tell them to, about the game.
What do you think was the hardest aspect of either the art style, developing the game, the design of the game? What do you think was one of the big challenges that you faced?
Yeah, well, you were talking about the physics. It's been a big challenge, basically, finding the right balance between like a really playable game that still is true to like my original goal of having this like realistic sailing game. And so there's a lot of like back and forth between like how do you make this understandable to players but still like retain that feeling of realism.
So I hope you found that all useful. I have a bunch of other PAX footage that I'm currently sorting through, so stay tuned for that. And you can also find all of the developers and their games in the description below. We do a bad British accent at the end of every video. My name is Michael. Consider giving me a little bit of a subscribe. Hopefully I see you in another one. Bye-bye.